Communication is oh, thanks, man. Communication. So people communicate differently and accept communication from people differently. I tend to be pretty direct, upfront, pretty black and white. Other people sometimes can be really vague and shoot around the bush, and it's hard for different communication styles to understand other people and hear what other people have to say. So as a master communicator, we have to control our communication style and communicate with people in their communication style. So an assertive communication style prefers detailed information. So facts, figures. An expressive communication style, they're interested in the people first and possible things. So expressive communication style, think of the salespeople type that you might know, the boisterous, kind of loud, really, Marika, if you guys have watched any webinars in our office, Marika is an expressive communication type. Super optimistic about the future, enthusiastic. So that's Marika. Introspective. They tend to be logical. They work in a sequence. They're interested in the principles involved, cost benefit, and you can have more than one communication style. Because I tend to be, what's the ROI, right? How can I get that? My mind just goes there super fast. And there's other great people. Manon is supportive, right? And that's her communication style. She's interested in the effects on people, right? When something comes down, she thinks about the people first and how they're going to perceive things. So test tip, understand the motivation styles and how they work in the workplace. And I'm going to say it's best to have all types, right? Because you need an entire group of people to make sure you make proper decisions. One person doesn't know everything. So here is a little activity for us. I want you guys to take some time and check all that apply. So both positive and negative, and then we can evaluate other people's or your communication style. There's no right or wrong answer. Everybody is perfect in their own right. So I'm going to give you guys a couple minutes. When you're done, just type a done in the chat box so I know where everybody's at. We're getting close. Any dones? I'm going to give everybody one more minute. All right, we've got quite a few dones here. So give this account, how many plain text words did you check? Go ahead and then how many of them are underlined, boldface, and italicized? Add those up. right? Can I get another done when somebody's done so I can gauge the time? Perfect. Look at you guys go. All right. If you checked mostly plain words, you're probably assertive. If you check the underlined words, you're expressive, boldface, introspective, and italicized, supportive. So in the chat box, put your highest score. Again, many people will have more than one. Hey, apparently you're assertive. Me too. I sit in the same boat. Melissa, I knew you were supportive. So Manon, what were you? Supportive and expressive? Let's look at those definitions again real quick. So expressive is, yep, Manon is interested in the possibilities first, right? She's somewhat of a visionary. What can we do? And how are those possibilities going to impact people? So I would agree, absolutely, Manon. You are, yep, that would be great. Super receptive, open to ideas. And then supportive. Darby, I would agree you are supportive from the little I know you, just like Melissa. Absolutely. You guys really care about the impact on people. And I can tell you a story about Manon because Manon's super supportive and it was kind of funny. Manon, can I tell them about the story? You probably don't know which one. So we're in February, like end of February. We have done all of our 1099s, W2s, everything's 100% done. And we're out of 1099 forms. And somebody needed some more 1099s processed. This is February. And I wished Manon had her camera on. And I said, Manon, we can't help that client because we don't have any more forms. You're going to have to tell them no. And the look on her face, oh my gosh, I still remember it. It's like I killed her puppy.
I don't know. I'm real bad at that no word when I'm the one who has to say it.
And it was kind of super cute. Okay, so effective communication. So always provide feedback, and feedback has two elements because there's the giver and the receiver. So people, when you communicate with somebody, what I say in my words and what Manon hears or anybody else hears, it's filtered through their lens of perspective that has been developed since the time they were born. No two people have the same perception. When I look at a color, I don't see it exactly like anyone else. And so remember that when you're talking to somebody, that the words that you say mean different things to them because they've had a lifetime of different events. And oftentimes it's hard to communicate with people and listen to them because our minds are going a million miles an hour, right? We're often distracted with our to-do lists, and they're called communication barriers. And I don't know, I've given a listening webinar a few times. I'm not sure if you guys have ever been on it, but we have many barriers to communication because if we're doing our to-do list or coming up with a rebuttal, it's really hard to hear what the person is saying. Or maybe we have a judgment against them or about them or in our mind about something specific. And oftentimes that can really interfere with hearing and listening and communicating. So in order to draw ourselves back to the conversation and be present, reflective listening, taking notes while people are talking so that we don't get too distracted and we're able to then reshare, re-say what we think we're hearing so that we're both on the same page. So in the payroll department as a payroll manager, interpersonal relationships are huge in our day-to-day life. Interpersonal relationships are huge. How do we set goals? How do we clarify expectations, empower others, show appreciation and reward? And everybody's motivated by different things, right? Appreciation and reward for one person might be something totally different than it is for another person. So, as a leader or somebody developing leadership skills, we have to be able to communicate effectively, as we just talked about with different communication styles. We have to be able to persuade people, persuasion skills, to see our point of view based on their communication style and their values. And we'll get into some values a little bit later so that we can build teams. So, bringing together good team members, you've got to be a good leader. You've got to understand group dynamics and understand team styles. And a big thing is being able to run an effective meeting. Because oftentimes, if somebody isn't running an effective meeting with an agenda, things can take a long time. And another great interpersonal skill is being able to solve problems, right? Conflict resolution, negotiation skills, being creative so that people who have two different understandings of a problem, you guys can bring the problem together and resolve it. And understand, again, cultural awareness. People from different backgrounds, they grew up in different parts of the country, maybe different religions, etc., all have a different cultural awareness. And that's the lens that we see life through. Everybody is different. Time management. I heard Manon and Darby talking about triage. Great word. I totally understand triage. That's when to-do lists are super important, that you can organize your day. Oftentimes at the beginning of the week, I have our team members do it on Thursdays so that on Fridays, if there's something that needs to be done urgently, we as a team can pull together to be sure that it's getting done. If you don't organize your day, oftentimes you're in crisis management or firefighting mode, right? Examples, your year-end processing. And we started planning our year-end already. So we're putting stuff together, putting training together, getting our client documentation together so that our clients can begin to prepare for that year-end payroll processing so that it all goes smoothly. So time management, it can get away from you. And, sitting around the water cooler can really eat up a lot of time. It's amazing how fast, looking at your phone, answering a phone call. It's said that if you answer a phone call, the time it takes to get back to what you were doing could be 15 minutes. And if customer support is not your normal task, that can take a lot of time out of your day when you're answering unneeded phone calls. So arranging your day that maybe you address emails in the morning or afternoon, do return phone calls at one time a day versus all day long, I think that could be helpful for most people's time management skills. Organization, using your Outlook calendar. Pop quiz. To be more efficient with time management techniques, it is best to reduce tasks that are, and go ahead and put your comment in chat. All right, we've got some answers coming in. All right, you guys are so smart. So smart. So Darby used the word triage, like triaging stuff and reprioritizing, I think is really important. So a test tip, a good example of exam questions about leadership, 7% of the exam focuses on payroll and admin management. So you might take another look at and reread some of those slides. Policies and procedures. I gotta say at Auto Paychecks, I'm often a little bit over the top on policies and procedures. And I think that with a policy and procedures manual, it's really helpful when we introduce a new team member into our company. There's so much training that needs to go on that good documentation has been enormous for us. And we revisit and revise virtually on every new hire because the software changed, the laws changed. That's a perfect example of why you need to update it. So be sure as a payroll manager that in case you get to leave out rich or you get hit by a bus, that you are protecting the company you work for and the employees you work with, that your job is documented, it's accessible, you practice it, maybe you've cross-trained somebody. And when you cross-train or train somebody to do your job, oftentimes people get scared about that. They're like, ooh, then I can be replaced. I'm going to say, if people would go with the mindset of, ooh, let me be replaced, they're going to move on to bigger and better things and they will never be replaced. They will be one of the most valued employees of the company. So never fear training other people to do your job. Quiz number 2, payroll documentation should be written. Okay, when I start seeing some answers, look at you guys go. C, yep, simple enough to allow payroll functions to be completed with little assistance. Sometimes popping in some screen images, all the tools that we have today with Word and Editor, it makes stuff really easy. Because we never know when we're going to have a family emergency, right? Have to catch that midnight flight to another state because we have a family member that's sick and we don't want to leave our companies high and dry and mess up payroll. So again, same test tip. Management skills. Some of the bigger payroll departments often have a payroll manager or leader, right? And they have to organize, plan, initiate, execute, control. They have to make sure that the job gets done. And oftentimes, when a project comes up, it's the leader or manager's job to define the goals and objectives of what needs to be achieved. Oftentimes, I see that it's really difficult for especially entry-level employees who's never had the freedom to learn, grow, and develop and make mistakes. So in the beginning, you have to give people goals and objectives and let them do those goals and objectives and give them the freedom to fail and make mistakes. But it is through that failure and making mistakes that they learn, grow, and develop. But they have to realize, what's the outcome? They don't have to necessarily do the job exactly the way you would do it, but they need the same result. My spreadsheets look very different from Melissa's spreadsheets, but if we get the same number at the end, it's success. Change management. So we see a ton of change management as many companies come to us, and it might be the first time that they've ever outsourced versus even coming from ADP or Paychex or one of the other payroll companies, just making the switch can be very, very difficult on certain personality types. And so as a leader, as a manager, it's our job when we're making a change, a software change, a procedure change, to manage that change because resistance is natural and inevitable. So we have to expect it, right? And oftentimes resistance is based out of typically fear, right? People are scared they won't do a good job, scared that they're going to lose control, scared that they may not look smart, scared, scared, scared. So that's where resistance comes in. And when resistance comes in, you have to use those communication styles we just talked about. And you might be an assertive communication style, but you need to take that communication style of a supportive person, go sit with that person that you can see in their face they're resistant, right? And find out why. What fear do they have to the perceived change that's causing a problem? And so you have to understand it. You have to deal with people's concerns, right? Because if you don't deal with one person's concern or two people's concern, sometimes it can turn into a group, and sabotage can happen, right? You might be changing tax software, and if you don't have everybody on the same page and leading them through the process, you could have 100 employees on a tax software, and you have to have buy-in from many levels of the company, specifically top management to your leaders. You have to organize a group of people that is your guiding coalition, right? So if you want to change something, you have to get together people who are supporters, who are your optimistic people, who can help sway other people to look at it as a positive versus having that fear of the negative. You have to create a vision of what it's going to be. You have to have people communicate that vision, and you might be on a change team for software, who knows what it is. And you're going to have a team with people with different strengths, right? So you have to have somebody who's detail oriented and in the conversion process, looking at the data, the numbers. You have to have the person who's super articulate and not afraid of public speaking to get up and maybe give presentations to other staff members. Training, it's going to be another important part. So you have to plan effectively, have timelines, and get people on board who are going to be super fearful of change. So when you start a change management plan, and we'll just use software as an example, I think most of us are in some type of technology and, do software as, whether it's going from Excel to, Google Docs or Microsoft or something. It's all about change, and it's all fearful because as we get older, our brains really like to settle down, and it's easy for us in our minds to do the same old versus being on the cutting edge. So really, really think about where people are coming from. And oftentimes with a change management plan, communication is super, super important, right? And it's really easy to work with a small group or a group and have discussions about what's going on, processes, procedures, progress, rollout dates, etc., and forget to let the other people in the company know. And so people feel left out in the cold, which again is going to drive up that fear of I'm going to get fired, fear of who knows what. So be keep communication open. Be sure to do training. Like some older people may need to have additional training if you're doing a big rollout of software. So change management, again, this is just kind of a rehash of some other slides. Sometimes when big changes occur, company cultures, maybe there's a merger of two companies, and that's a big change management issue, right? You got two accounting firms that merge, or Pepsi and Coke were to merge. Gosh, what would that look like? And oftentimes consultants come on from the external environment, professionals, to help companies with the change, because people get so fearful, right? And they will help you work through those issues. And when you're going through change, you have to think about internal and external and what was the change. Was it good? Is it bad? So say it's a payroll software, you're going from QuickBooks to an outsourced payroll service provider. Is your employee satisfaction increasing, right? Are your employees more able to look at their check stubs, right? Has the efficiency of the payroll department improved or decreased, right? It's compliance. Maybe it's a company that had a lot of tax notices, and now that you've switched to payroll, maybe there's less. So with every change, a good indication is staff morale. How is it? Do you have groups chatting around the water cooler who are unhappy, and you have to address that and confront it head on, and that can be really uncomfortable for people. Staffing. Oh gosh, we know how hard staffing is in our current environment. It's really hard to find, and I gotta say it's been this way for years. It's really hard to find an exceptional teammate, right? Somebody that works as hard as you do. And somebody that you can delegate tasks to, that you can assign responsibility and authority, and that you trust. Trust is a huge, huge component. So as a payroll manager, you have to learn that delegation is an ongoing process, and you have to understand that that new hire that you brought in will not even remotely close have the same knowledge, skills, and abilities that you have. And so I'm going to say small tasks, lots of accountability, lots of mentoring, lots of follow up, follow through, because you want to train them for success, right? Again, you want to train them to take your job. If that was everybody's goal, that would be an amazing goal. Because just think of the staff of people that you would have to rely on if you taught them everything you know. So give feedback, both positive and negative. I know it's really hard. And again, we could look back at people's communication style, specifically that supportive style, to give somebody negative feedback. But negative feedback, if it's given correctly, could be as positive as positive feedback. People learn, grow, and develop through constructive criticism. And it's constructive criticism about a task that they did, not about the person, right? Don't make things personal about people. So many companies have formal training programs, checklists, etc. So be sure you have timeframes on goal setting for your employees, like they've got to get through X training with X result in a certain amount of time. If you take everything back to the way that we went through college, we knew what was expected because we got a syllabus on day one of our class, and we knew when things were due, and we got graded, every week, every day, sometimes depending on the class. So think about that methodology when you are training new staff members. Don't just set them at a desk with a computer and pen and paper, because they will never, ever know what to do. And then everybody's going to be upset and frustrated. So directing employees. Everybody, as with communication styles, have things that motivate them differently, right? Some people are motivated by money, achievements, affiliation, recognition. So salespeople typically like to have their name yelled from, the top story of the building that they did a great job. They want everybody to know, right, that they achieved their sales goal. Often, if you work in a sales department with salespeople, you will see that they're super competitive and their productivity is on the wall for everybody to see. I'm going to say for most people, they would die at that, right? If somebody else knew how many phone calls they took or what their quota was. Some personality skills, office type workers would never want somebody to know that. And it's just difference in motivation, different in drivers, stuff that gives people, energy. The supporters, they really like to be in the background and helping people and have subtle, quiet acknowledgement, like, hey, man, you did a really good job. And if you publicly recognize them, sometimes they're going to be shy and it's going to be hard for them to take. So managing people, coaching, payroll managers use their communication skill that we just talked about, feedback and listening skills to coach their employees. If it's a day-to-day coaching, mentoring, and have one-on-one sessions with your employees often. Certainly a new employee, you're going to be talking with them daily to see how that they're doing. You're going to have possibly quarterly reviews, kind of an informal review. Then it could go to 6 months, once a year. But if you're not meeting with those employees, they have no idea if they're doing a good, bad, or a good job or a bad job. And like we said earlier, negative feedback is better than no feedback at all. And if you phrase it negative, like, we could have done this Excel spreadsheet like this. Most people want to please, right? They live their life to please other people. So if you can have that open communication style and understand that most people want to make their supervisors incredibly happy. And there's some, improving personnel or attitude problems that affect job performance. So if somebody has an attitude problem, I'm going to say that is one of the hardest things to fix. As I said earlier, we all have the lenses that we see life through that started as a child, and how people see life, whether they're super optimistic or pessimistic, can really impact their job. So attitude's a tough one to fix, and it's often said to hire for attitude because you can train skill to a very large degree. So as you move through your career from an entry level employee, you're just starting, and maybe you're getting a few responsibilities, you're proving that you're reliable and that you understand the technical aspects of payroll, and you're moving up and have the ability to supervise other people, and you're learning to create a vision, and you're working on your own possibly to enhance your leadership skills, because leadership is taught. It's, there's a theory between, is it taught or are people born that way? And there's a couple different theories. But if you weren't born with leadership skills, certainly there is enough stuff out that you can develop your leadership skills and start to lead by example, start to be able to have a vision and articulate it, ability to have better communication so that you can have a team. And if you can teach other people how to communicate and understand their motives, then you can work on your leadership skills because they're able to self-manage to a degree. So when something happens, an error, a mistake, right? Think about it. Is it worth it? We all have to pick our mountains to choose to climb, and we have to decide what types of things need to be reported. So in our environment, all errors need to be reported, right? So whether the client made a mistake on a payroll and they need to reprocess, we have a way to log that. And can we work with the client on better training, better understanding? Can we train them on payroll laws, rules? Can we invite them to this organization for more training so that their skills can improve? Because who likes to have a mistake on payroll? So you have to really understand, is it important? Were the processes that didn't get followed, were they clearly understood and recorded and read? Was it written in your documentation on how things were done? So there's a lot to managing people. So performance reviews, and we talked about it a little bit earlier. how important performance reviews, and oftentimes larger companies, with several hundred to thousands of employees, certainly run metrics on the payroll department's performance, right? What's the cost per employee? Um, how much does it cost to reissue a manual check? How much does it cost to have the payroll system per full-time employees? And so they're able to benchmark. And we talked yesterday about financial benchmarks and how everybody records revenue the same way. We all follow the same rules according to GAAP and the Financial Accounting Standards Boards. And if in our company, in our payroll department, if we're able to manage how we process payroll, we can look at efficiencies, right? Because if we can quantify stuff, we can compare apples to apples and understand how we're performing as a company. Because often if we can look at performance standards and compare ourselves to another company of a similar size, and we can go, oh, our payroll costs are, super expensive. We've got 4 people in the payroll department, and another company of a similar size might have 1 or 2, and you can really compare your processes and procedures with theirs. So staffing again, and I think we've covered most of this. And with KPIs, key performance indicators, oftentimes we can use those metrics to understand staffing levels and where we need staff. And whether you need to hire an entry-level person or somebody with specialized level, because you probably need, I don't know, 6 staff people for a manager or a supervisor. And every company is different depending on how their company operates. But always hire the right employees. The state of Colorado has some new laws and rules for comps, and how you need to do job descriptions and posting. And be sure when you hire somebody that they have looked at that job description, and you have multiple people giving the interview, because everybody's going to see something from a different perspective. But be sure that that candidate has the right attitude, right? Got to have a positive attitude. Otherwise, you bring in somebody with a negative attitude, and how fast is that going to impact your company? And not only do they have a great attitude, but they're able to do the specific tasks for the job. But the first step taken when giving employees latitude to develop their own method for achieving results is, and I'll watch for some answers. All right, we've got some answers coming in. Yep, establish the desired results. Like I talked about earlier, oftentimes I give Melissa tasks and I just really tell her what needs to be done. We have some back and forth, and she gets clarification from me, right? Open communication, because what I think needs to be done, if I don't effectively communicate it to her, but it's her job to ask clarifying questions, so that once she's finished with the project, I don't look at the spreadsheet and go, oh my God, what did you do? So this is the same test tip that's popped up a few times. All right. So this goes to building your job description. Lots of detail, something for everybody to look at and read when you build your job description. So interviewing the job candidate, that's always so much fun. Recruiting is huge. Getting people, finding the right person and getting them to stay. We all know that turnover is super expensive because you invest so much money, time, energy, and effort, not only paying that person's salary, but when you have other people training and working with that person you just hired, the costs like double because you have, or triple because you've got a super qualified person who could be producing revenue to a degree, doing a job task, and they're working with your new employees, so they're not producing, your new employees not producing, and you kind of get a bottleneck. So interviewing, asking open-ended questions. How would you handle this? Tell me about this. Can you give me an example? Are great questions, and it gets past the superficial of tell me about yourself. Where did you go to college? I think finding out what people value and what the job needs is huge. If you're a CPA firm and you're wanting someone to work 60 hours a week, that needs to be in the job description and ask people, you know, how do you feel about working 60 hours a week during this time frame? Do and if they go, oh, I want life balance, it could be a bit difficult. But I'm sure, you you know, everybody has a way around that. And certainly life is getting to be much more flexible and hiring more remote workers and work-life balance. People are working more flexible hours. So strategic planning. So as the leader of your payroll department, no matter how big or small, sometimes you have to start planning. We talked a few minutes ago about year-end planning. Um, we've already started it, and we don't reinvent the wheel every year. We've got a plan that we executed last year. We make little tweaks to it. Anything that we can put in our strategic plan to help our clients' year-end processes go smoothly. That's our goal, right? Defining the goals and objectives is that we all have some semblance of work-life balance, and we get our customers educated and notified and up to date on what they need to do for their company as it relates to payroll to get them through year end. So each one of you, there's governmental agencies here, there's CPA firms on this call, and you guys all have things that you have to plan through. So always define the goal and objectives. You have to give it a time frame. I am probably the worst about giving people a short time frame. Like, can you have that to me in 2 weeks? I really want it yesterday, but I'm going to give you 2 weeks. So if you don't define a time frame, there's a missing piece of expectations, right? So if there's subtasks, working with me, and I wish you guys could see her on some of our meetings in the chat bar, she is putting out the goal and objectives and the subtasks. And at the end of the meeting, we just have to assign the accountable person with a due date. And it's a great way to run meetings. And oftentimes when you're planning for something big, right? Ordering new office desks for everybody, that's a big change. Maybe you're going to move office locations. Again, another really big change. So you have to get people inside, outside of the organization to help plan. The phone company, the electric company, who knows? It's a big task. And you have to start putting together a timeline and due dates. Budgeting. Whoever thinks about budgeting when it comes to a payroll department, but if you work for a really large company that has 1,000 employees and you're printing paper checks and mailing them every week because you happen to be a weekly payroll, just postage alone could be enormous. And if you went to a bi-weekly frequency or a semi-monthly, that cuts the labor cost to produce payroll in half. And it frees up the time for the payroll department that maybe they could be doing something different. Maybe they only need one person versus two. And that second person that they had in the payroll department could go over to the accounts payable department and fill that niche or that need. So understanding that payroll really has a cost, and if you could move from paper checks to direct deposit or pay cards, all of those things are really big cost savers for companies. Web-enabled time and attendance, that it integrates with your payroll system. That is huge. That just a time and attendance system saves so much money for companies that oftentimes the time and attendance savings pays for the time and attendance system in a few months, just because of rounding errors, looking at the paper timesheets and all that shuffling of paper. And I look at time and attendance system similar to, not that anybody here is old enough to remember, but me, back in the day when we had to type on a typewriter with carbon paper to make copies, right? And then after we typed that letter, we couldn't reuse it. It was one and done. And if we wanted to send it to another person, we had to retype it. Time and attendance systems are the same way as going to an automated word processing document or Excel spreadsheet. You can use that data again and again and again and manipulate it and put it into Excel spreadsheets and do forecasting. It's an amazing thing. So that's just one item to help reduce payroll costs. And if you're a company that wants to do a change in desks, technology, work location, etc., and it's your idea, as you might be just a staff employee, but you have come across a nifty new, man, it comes across really great marketing software tools all the time. And I'm like, great, how much does it cost? Is probably my first words. And so she has to come back to me with a business case on how getting Hootsuite or something different, or we went from Zoom to whatever, how is that going to be beneficial to us as a company? And so she puts together a case, or could put together a case on the pros and cons of the benefits. I remember back when I was in my 20s and I worked for a cabinet manufacturer in Phoenix, and I kid you not, we had a lot of manual processes in our accounting, like the aging for accounts payable, I kid you not, was on an Excel spreadsheet, and it was super crazy. So I won't tell you, but this was probably late 80s, maybe early 90s. And I went to the owner of the company and I said, hey, I think, we need to implement a new accounting software. And I spent a lot of time researching Great Plains. QuickBooks wasn't available at that point in time. And I put together a business case and I said, this is how it's going to be efficient. This is how it's going to enhance our capabilities. This is how things are going to work. This is what it currently costs us to have the accountant come in and do ABC. And if we, went to an automated system, it could look like BCD. And then, you move to the implementation phase. But if I just went to him and said, hey, I've got a great idea, he wouldn't know the pros and cons of benefits. So as we work on a project, we have to build teams. And it might not even be a project. You just might have, 4 bookkeepers in your department, or 4 people helping you with payroll, or in your whole office environment. You might just have a few people, or just think about organizing the WRPA. We had to go through the forming stage, the storming, the norming, and the performing. And I can see characteristics. When we got together with Becky for lunch a couple of years ago, we had to learn a lot, right? We had to understand the rules. We didn't have any history of working together, right? And then we had to go to the storming. We defined responsibilities and roles. We met. Um, we became friends and we accepted one another and the strengths and the weaknesses that we all share. And our purpose was defined. And then we went to performing. And I think our organization's running pretty well for 1 year underneath our belt. We're getting some stuff really going. And there are ways to move through each one of those phases. We set a mission statement early on and we set goals that's read at the beginning of each of our meetings because we had to define what we wanted to be to our members, right? And, as we went from the forming stage to the storming and norming, we listened to each other. We set time together and they have executive meetings that aren't part of the regular monthly meetings with members. And we continue on to performing. So as we're doing our first seminar, we'll evaluate it and see how things are going. And I just gave Manon some praise and flatter because she's doing a great job on things that I can't do. And we have to share responsibility. And so she needs to communicate with the rest of the team what she needs help with. So management skills and theories. And again, this is kind of getting redundant. People process proficiencies. The leader is the one who gives direction. And there's certain types of managers, and and again, this is just a recap, different approach, different layout, right? That there are supportive people who are task oriented, and there are people who are people oriented. So if you look at the relationship down the middle, like delegating, low task, low relationship. So I fall underneath this category because I'm pretty high task. I'm actually high task. But each person will fall under a category. And it's just a different model than the communication style we looked at a little bit earlier and the supportive, assertive quiz that we went through. It's just a different way of phrasing it and looking at it. So pop quiz. And I think we've got 2 more slides. So if everybody pops that in. And if we need to go back, because I went through that slide too fast, just type back. The payroll manager personally directs the work of her staff, a perfectionist with low tolerance for errors and great pride in the quality service award that the department won for 3 straight years. The payroll manager's situational leadership style would be high task, low relationship. So low tolerance for errors. That is going to be an indicator of relationship and that she's high task. Okay, let's take a look at this slide. The principle-centered leadership, treat people the way you want to be treated. I'm going to say people's number one emotional need, whether they know it or don't know it, is security, right? That they want a sense of belonging to a group, and that's going to help their self-esteem. If somebody sits outside of the group in your work environment, they have a low sense of security and there's probably going to be high employee turnover. So as a manager, you have to guide them and guide all the people that you have. Wisdom is the ability to maintain balance and perspective and, be diverse with your employment staff internally and externally, and understand that people are just different. And that's okay. It's not right, wrong. It just is. And being able to allow people to be who they are. They don't have to be like you is an amazing thing. But as a leader, empowerment is huge. So give desired results, provide guidance, hold people accountable, and identify the consequences of people's actions. Quiz. An employee was an average performer until he was put in charge of a task analyzing the state workers' compensation program. Since then, his performance has improved remarkably. What was the motivator for this employee? Leadership. Yep. And if you can, again, train yourself out of a job by teaching other people leadership skills, you will be successful. All right, kids. Woo. Questions? I think we're perfectly on time. 101.
Thank you.
All right, everybody have a great weekend.
Bye, girls.
Bye.
Bye.